Hi everyone, this is Otto Lee, and I would love to talk to a really good friend of ours today to talk about Labor Day, which is of course being celebrated every year in September, and usually the signifying the start of the school year. Who we have today is Mr. Ron Lin, who is a retired labor leader that has served on the head of the South Bay Labor Council as the board president there, and also as the vice president of the state labor Fed of California. Hi, Ron. How are you today?
I'm good, Otto. Thanks. How about you?
Thank you so much for taking time to speak with today. So, Labor Day is coming up, and I would certainly want to chat with you about the significance of it. And I know you actually have taught about the labor history before. So, why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about the history of Labor Day and what does it really mean?
Well, Labor Day has a long history in the United States. We've been celebrating it for many, many decades. And, it's particularly important, I think, today. Labor Day is a time when we honor the contribution of America's working men and women. And it's obviously more important this year because we're recognizing frontline workers in healthcare and public safety, grocery workers, delivery drivers, and others that are continuing to provide the services that we need during this pandemic. It's unprecedented times, and we know those workers are putting their lives at risk. So this is a perfect time to honor them.
Mhm. Now, in terms of, we all know about Labor Day sales. People do their barbecue with the dogs. So obviously, this year is probably not a good time to do barbecue given the high risk of fire and air pollution issues. But, Labor Day is far more important than the holiday. So would you want to tell people what exactly did labor do for the American workers all these years and what are the benefits that we are enjoying today through the
Well,
work?
yeah, sure. And of course, my fellow UFCW members appreciate when folks go to the store and buy the hot dogs and the beer and the potato
Sure.
chips from them. That keeps them employed. Uh, but look, this is a time also, not only do we honor the America's workers, but we recognize the work of the organized labor movement.
Mhm.
Many of the workplace and other rights that we take for granted, overtime pay, paid holidays, vacations, pensions, health benefits, health and safety standards, child labor laws, even free public education, and a lot of other benefits and rights, those are in place because America's workers organized, advocated, and in many cases agitated for them.
Mhm.
Today's unions continue to advocate not only for their members, but for all workers. And if you think about it, what other organization is there that fights for the rights of workers? If it's not the American Union Movement, who else is going to do it? That's why it's so important. And that's why on Labor Day, we should step back and recognize the contributions that those unions have made for all of us.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned some of these benefits, right? You mentioned public education or 40-hour work week, or 8-hour workday. Tell us a little bit more how those came about.
Well, again, workers organized, first they organized around their individual workplace rights. I mean, if you go back in history, organizing took place to demand that the unions be recognized at those workplaces, and then they organized for their own particular standards on the job, depending on where they were working. But as unions grew and as they organized, then and as they gained strength, they decided to advocate for stronger workplace safety standards that benefited again, not just those unions, not just those union members, but all workers. So it was over time. Sometimes it was federal labor laws, sometimes it was local and state labor laws. And many of those workplace protections came to pass as a result of events. One example is very famous, the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, where women that were working on clothing were locked into a facility. They couldn't get out, and the place caught on fire, and most of them died because there were no workplace protections in place. So that created a big backlash. Organizers and other folks got together and fought for standards to keep those sorts of things from happening. So it just kind of went from there. And if you look at the success of the American labor movement or the strength of it, it's like this fulcrum where you've got you have this in the middle, and you've got government on one side and unions on the other side, and the I'm getting a little wonky on the history stuff now, but where the government sort of stands on rights of workers to organize, that kind of impacts how successful unions are. Clearly when we saw what was happening with children working and people working 12, 16, 17 hours a day, society sort of caught up with the angst that workers had, and working with unions, came together and brought like-minded people together to pass some of these workplace protections that we enjoy now.
Right. So that's why we have child labor laws. So you cannot employ child labor for that very reason. And unfortunately, as we know, we also still see those situations in many countries around the world. The story you mentioned how garment workers are being locked in factories when the fire took place and people basically die. I mean, still has happened a few years back, and I remember in I think Bangladesh and other places where a lot of our garments are being shipped to be made. So even though we have those, and I think this is the kind of issues now that when we come to international negotiations with international treaties, these type of labor laws are now being incorporated in many of these international treaties to make sure that those countries, or when we especially outsource the people, get other countries to make clothes for us, that the factories will have to abide by these labor standards that has been established from the American labor movement, right?
Well, you're absolutely right, Otto, because let's face it, a lot of the products that we use in the United States are made elsewhere, where labor laws are not nearly as good as they are in the United States. So you have the American labor movement working with other international labor organizations to improve the standards in what we call the supply chain, where we get all those products and all that material. In fact, it was also an issue when I was on the CalPERS board and we were looking at our investments. I mean, we took a strong look at the companies that we invested in to make sure that they were focusing on the workplace standards and what was happening in their supply chains.
That's right. And in terms of the, like you said, about the international rules, what are the key issues that you're looking at today that the labor movement is fighting very hard right now these days in the United States?
Well, unfortunately, we're on the defensive now because we have an administration in Washington that is working very hard to undercut, for instance, health and safety standards. We've seen that in the coal industry and elsewhere, while at the same time, they're trying to undermine the rights of workers to organize. I mean, first they're doing it where it's easier for them, which is undermining the rights of government workers to unionize and to advocate for their members. But let's face it, we know that the current administration in Washington and the leaders in the Senate would like to weaken the rights of unions. They would like to pass a national right to work law, which would be devastating, which would undermine union strength. So we're obviously working to change that this November. But because we're so vulnerable at the federal level, that's why it's important, and why the South Bay Labor Council and local unions and even elsewhere labor councils work so hard to elect good local leaders like you that will fight for workplace rights and will fight for the rights of unions to continue to organize. I mean, that's critical for us. So we don't just look at the national level. We look at the state, we look at counties, we look at cities, we look at school boards to try to elect people like you that we know that are going to be on the same side as we are.
Right. So, for example, when you talk about the federal minimum wage, right now that we have is clearly very significantly less than the minimum wage in the state of California, for example, almost half at this point, as you could see. And so the federal laws really only act as the base, right, or the bottom line of what rights should be. And certainly the individual states have the rights to have better benefits and better rules to protect the workers. So the words like OSHA, for example, right, for Office of Safety and Health in California, a lot of those rules are a result of the California labor movement to make sure that we give even more protection to our day-to-day workers, right?
Well, of course, and not only state laws, but local laws as well. You mentioned the minimum wage. local cities can have a higher minimum wage. You're right. Federal law is typically, in most cases,
That's just the
federal law
lowest
sets the
bottom.
minimum standards.
Mhm.
I mean, there are some cases like union organizing, then you have federal preemption, under labor law, we can't do something different. But, we're very fortunate here in California that we have a very strong labor movement and have been able to elect good leaders that are aligned with us on our values. And, because of that, we've been able to set some great standards for California workers.
Definitely. And I see behind you is actually one of our famous union leaders who helped organize the farm workers. Cesar Chavez picture back there. And last week, I was able to be very honored to have one of his most strongest working partner, Dolores Horta, who attended my Zoom birthday party as well when she proclaimed "Si se puede" con Otto Lee. So we certainly have a lot of friends. These are actually the co-founders of the United Farm Workers, right? And doing the march from Delano or Central Valley all the way to Sacramento to get rights for the grapes boycott and for the farmers. That was very instrumental to starting the labor farm worker movement, getting the farm worker to get organized.
Well, yeah, you're right about that, Otto. I mean, there's a great history of the United Farm Workers and what they did for the folks that harvest our food. I mean, they are critical workers. I mentioned other frontline workers. We need to include those as well. They continue to be out there and picking the carrots and the lettuce and so on. I was fortunate to meet Cesar Chavez a few times during my career, once on a picket line, once at another event, got to talk to him. Just an amazing person, a real inspiration. And, I'm proud of what you mentioned, the photo behind me. I received that at San Jose Evergreen Community College District when I left the board after 12 years, because not only was I on the board, I was teaching labor history. I did a pretty long sort of course on the history of the United Farm Workers. And of course, Cesar spent much of his early time in San Jose.
That's right.
Organizing. So it's just a natural thing for us to honor him.
Right, exactly. So there's so much labor history that affect us nationally or even internationally that actually homegrown right here in San Jose, which is really amazing. And again, thank you. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, Ron?
No, man, I think we covered it pretty well.
Good, good. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I think this has been a very insightful and important discussion about what Labor Day really means to people. Not just about barbecue and a car sale. This is really about celebrating and educating people, reminding the importance of our history of our democracy and the contribution of the American labor organization. So again, thank you very, very much for being here today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Otto. And again, remind people when they buy those hot dogs and other items, go to a union represented grocery store, stay away from places like Walmart. Thanks.
There we go. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.